Our next guest on Right Off the Bus for our Under the Radar segment is Matt Doyle. And Matt is one of my absolute favorite follows on Twitter for all things MLS and U.S. men's national team. And he works as a senior writer for the MLS, producing a fantastic series called Armchair Analyst. And just Matt, thanks again for coming on to talk about what you do with the MLS and the league in general. I mean, you have two Revs fans here up in
Hmm.
Massachusetts, so we're gonna try not to be too biased here, talking MLS.
I mean, fan biases, dealing with that is part of my job. You guys see how active I am on Twitter, and so you could say it's actually a large part of my job. So I will forgive you if a little Boston accent leaks out of you, or maybe you have the Homer glasses on a little too tightly. So especially because the Revs sucked for a long time, and last year it started to come together pretty well, and I think you guys should probably be pretty psyched for the year to come. So again, I will not hold it against you if you're too biased here.
I appreciate it because the 0-5 record in the MLS Cup is definitely hard to sit with. So I will ride the high horse of the end of last season. That's for sure. But Matt, our first question is just: would you mind talking a little bit about what your job is with the MLS as a senior writer and what you do on a daily basis?
Well, on a daily basis, it really does depend whether it's middle of the week or like a game day. A game day, it's all about just literally sitting in my chair with I'll have 4 or 5 screens going at once, watching as many of the games as I can. Usually, it's one that I zero in on, and it's at that point it's just like, all right, pulling apart the tactical formational line of confrontation, who's playing well, what are they trying to be a proactive team and use the ball to disorganize the basically like reading the attack tactics in the game. And then my job very explicitly is to write columns about that. I have to explain the game. Um, it's not like beginner level, though sometimes it is that, but it's like try to get in depth a little bit, and really tell people like here's why the Revs started playing better and Tejan Buchanan in the postseason was absolutely unstoppable on the overlap. Here are the preconditions that happened that allowed him to be such an attacking force, whereas during the season he playing on the wing, he wasn't able to unlock the defense like that. And so it's kind of like what Bill Barnwell does for ESPN
Mm.
with the NFL, or what Zach Lowe does for the NBA. I'm the MLSsoccer.com version of that guy. And so there's columns primarily, and then there's a couple of podcast appearances on Extra Time every week. There are guest appearances on little podcasts like your own. There's one of the things that we've done the past couple of years that I've really loved is doing like video analysis, making quick anywhere from 30 to 90 seconds in the moment, explaining why this goal happened, explaining why this team was able to pitch a shutout. So stuff like that, being able to be reactive and do it like on the fly as the games are happening, that's a big part of it as well. So all of that gives me a very, very unconventional day-to-day routine. Like I can't tell you what my day is like because every day tends to be a little bit different.
That's fair, and it's a bit unrelated, but what is your cat's name since they're joining us on the podcast?
This is General So. This is my pride and joy.
I love it.
She is the old girl, and Taquito, who's an asshole, will likely be joining us at some point, and that's when you'll hear the hissing and growling. So
It's awesome. I love the two names.
Well, the role sounds interesting. It sounds like it's always changing every day. And a question that we've asked a few guests that we've had on that work in American soccer, but what has it been like to cover the MLS while it's growing faster than any other sport at this rate and any other really than we've ever imagined the MLS could?
well, when I started this job, there were 15 teams, and now there's 28, soon to be 30, or 27, soon to be 30. So what it's like has been tiring, because like this job, like I try to watch every game, and I don't get it, but like I probably watched 250 MLS games last year, and every like my Sunday night column is a recap of pretty much everything that happened during the weekend. It was a lot easier to do that when there were 15 teams. Now there's almost 15 games. But like I was a fan before I got this job. And I was a fan of MLS from day one. I was a fan of US soccer from before the 1990 World Cup, which is the first one we had qualified for in 40 years. I became a fan in large part because I wanted something to just root for, where you could always be the underdog. And the U.S. was always the underdog, always. And MLS, from day one, MLS was always the underdog, and everybody was writing the league off, and this is going to fold, this is going to fail, just like NASL did, just like every soccer league did. And just being a part of this group of fans, really, that wasn't going to let it fail, was going to show up to watch every game on TV, show up to games, be in the supporters section and sing and play the trumpet and everything else under the sun. It was fun. It was to be a part of that was, I don't know, like our little crusade. That's a bad word. I shouldn't use the word crusade. our little endeavor. And to what has happened over the past 3 years, I think, is that we've gone past the point where there is an existential crisis. We've gone past the point where MLS could fail, and now we're starting to see the best teams in the world shop for our players, which is huge. And we're seeing our best teams compete toe-to-toe with the best teams on the continent, who then go on to compete toe-to-toe with the best teams in the world. We haven't gotten over the final hurdle yet. We haven't beaten Liga MX and Liga MX team in the CCL Championship or the CONCACAF Champions League final. We haven't gotten to the Club World Cup, but like it has been it has been a ride, man. It has been a ride to where it's like it doesn't feel like we're the underdogs anymore. U.S. soccer isn't really an underdog anymore. U.S. soccer is like the switch has been flipped, and it's been cool to be a part of it. And I'm very curious to see what happens in 2022 at the World Cup, to see if the underdog label gets shed sort of for good.
That's a very interesting point. It definitely could with the crop of players that's coming up right now. And moving on to your career a little bit, when was it that you knew sports journalism is where you were headed, and why was it soccer specifically that you chose?
Well, soccer specifically, just because it was my favorite sport. It was either going to be soccer or basketball, and I did a little of both for a while. But I started as a soccer writer when I was 14 years old. I went down to the local paper. My dad drove me down there, and I walked in with I had written out a game story from like a local JV basketball game, and I said, "Can I have a job?" And they said yes. And so my dad would drive me, all over the county to cover like high school girls basketball or like lacrosse or whatever. And I was, a little 14, 15-year-old kid covering local high school. So that's when it started, and it went on through college, and it went on, I got off the path a little bit in my 20s and 30s. And then when I was in my early 30s, this job sort of materialized, and I jumped at it, and very luckily ended up getting it.
That's an incredible story to start that career and that passion at 14 or 15. And shout out to your dad as well for going around and driving you to all those games and making that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it was good to have a chauffeur.
And as Chandler mentioned in the intro, now for the MLS, you have this series called Armchair Analyst. So how did that series start? And were you the one that created it originally? If not, did you know how it began?
Mm-hmm. So it was the type of writing that I had been doing. The Armchair Analyst thing is like, that is like the tactical look at the game, whether it's U.S. national team or a little bit of women's national team or obviously MLS and some Yanks abroad stuff. Like that was always the stuff that interested me, and that's always the stuff I had been doing on my own time. And then when I got this job, that was the type of column that they wanted me to write. And back 10 years ago now, when I got it, it was just once a week, and my main job was as an editor. Like I was just a desk editor, making sure that like all the boxes got checked, the website didn't break, and like people got paid on time, and like we had people covering the games. That was that, and slowly, the column resonated with enough people so that they stopped giving me editorial shifts and started just being pure content creation, which is dope, which is much better job for me anyway.
Yeah.
As for the name, it was kind of a joke, because my I never played at any level. I was a terrible athlete. And so I like a pure like everything that I see about the game is purely aesthetic and like just I cannot put myself in those shoes. I can only say here's how the chess pieces line up. My old boss was a former professional player. He was a former MLS player, and he like was kind of making fun of me, calling me an armchair analyst. And it's like that's actually pretty good. Why don't we go with that as the name of the column? And it stuck, and it again it resonated with people. So and it resonated with me.
It's definitely a catchy name. And well, the MLS season's starting back up next month, so you must be excited, as are we. Are there any teams or players that you're expecting to make a big jump this season?
Um, we haven't gotten to that point yet because there's still so much roster building to be done. But I think what we saw from Columbus last year, especially in the postseason, once they got healthy, they were dominant. And then even in MLS Cup, they weren't actually healthy, but they were still dominant. They were the first team ever to put up a 3-goal win in MLS Cup. They got better this offseason. So Columbus is going to be. They were already really good. They're going to be better. LAFC, they, you know they almost won CONCACAF Champions League. Like they took Tigres to the 90th minute before eventually losing, as freaking always happens in that competition. They got better this offseason as well. And they still have a DP slot open. So I'm expecting them to make a big signing. I think those are the two clearly the best teams in the league going into the season at this point. But the transfer window's still open. The transfer window in MLS stays open until mid-May. There's a lot that can change in a couple of big signings and maybe some rule adjustments as well, because there's some reporting about that. Things can change at the top of this league very, very quickly. So it is premature to start wagering money on who is going to be the breakout team or the top of the league this year.
You see those columns at the end of the season that are like the way, way, way too early power rankings for next season. It's still too early.
I write those too, man, because people click them and you got to get those page views or you're screwed. So there you go.
That's definitely true. So like I said, we're both Revs fans. So I want to ask a couple questions about the Revs real quick. In one of your latest columns, you were talking about a big question facing each team in the East, each team in the West. And the one that you brought up for the Revs was Adam Buxa. And can he take that next step forward next year, and should he kind of get a pass for the weird year in his first year, not having Carles Hill healthy and all that? So what are you expecting from him this season? Do you think that jump could happen or is going to happen, especially with Carles Hill captaining the squad this year and being healthy for the full year?
It's literally $1 million question, like more than $1 million question, given the amount of money that the Revs spent on him. A lot of what Buxa does is not necessarily quantifiable given the type of metrics that we have on hand. I think he does a good job of dragging the defense around. I think he does a really good job of getting into the right spots to be a difference maker or to open up space for Gustavo Bo or Teal Bunbury or Carlos Heel. And I think that matters and that makes him valuable. At the same time, in order to be a starting center forward in this league, especially DP center forward, you have to put the ball in the net.
Right.
You have to do that. And he wasn't terrible. I think he had 7 goals in about 1,600 minutes, which is, again, it's not terrible, but it's not good enough to be a starting center forward for a team that has aspirations of winning the whole thing. The advanced numbers that we do have that can sort of measure some of the stuff I was talking about, actually really like Buxa in terms of expected goals, in terms of XG chain, which is a little more advanced, and I'm not even really completely able to explain it. Those numbers say that he's a good player, and those numbers over a long enough timeline tend to be right. But what my eye test see, and I can't go just by the numbers, what I see in terms of my eye test is like he can't create separation against physical and athletic center backs. And if you can't create that little bit of separation, you're going to have a lot of trouble scoring goals. And it's something that we've seen time and again in this league from guys Like really, it happens a lot to guys who come from Scandinavia, because Scandinavia, it's a technical league, and it's a pretty they are technical leagues, and they're pretty tactical, but they're not very physical leagues. So guys will put, or Switzerland's another one. Guys will put up big numbers there, then come to MLS and just not be able to handle the physicality. I don't think Adam Buxa was able to handle the physicality last year, and specifically the closing speed and the ability to create separation. That is going to be the big test to determine in 2021 whether or not he's actually worth that DP slot.
Yeah, because if he doesn't figure it out this year, I mean, that DP spot is as valuable as anything in the league. So that's a decision the Revs will have to make, that's for sure. And obviously the Revs have been doing a lot this offseason. They've signed a pretty decent amount of players, and built a decent amount of squad depth. Do you think that the depth that they have been building is enough to get them over that hump? Or do you think that they're still one piece away, kind of like Bruce Arena's been teasing, saying, yes, we are planning on another signing. We would like to bring another player in.
Yeah, I don't think Bruce is lying about that. What I see with this Revs team, and I'm looking at their transactions now. I mean, so they brought in Cap Toom. They signed a couple of Bruce's old friends in Boateng and De La Garza. And, Mafla might end up being a key addition for them on the back line as well. If you look at it, they're still thin at center back. And then the other thing, and this is especially true of Bruce Arena teams, like you need multiple match winners. Bruce's best teams in DC United had Marco Echeverri and Jaime Moreno, or either Raul Diaz Arce or Roy Lassiter. His best teams in LA had Donovan, Keane, and Beck. This team went flat on their face without Carlos Heel. And there's no replacing that, and there's not even any mitigating it on the roster. So I do kind of believe, Bruce, that there is going to be another big signing, and I do think that signing can be the difference between New England being like a good team who could maybe make a run and one of the favorites.
All right, well, that's good to hear for us as fans.
Yeah, you guys are happy. There you go.
Well, moving away from our Revolution questions, one of the best parts of following you on Twitter is watching you interact with European soccer fans, especially mentioning guys like Michael Bradley. So I was just curious, what's the easiest way to rile up a European soccer fan when you talk about like the quality of MLS or American players in general?
So in general, European soccer fans are like rate MLS higher than a lot of Americans do. So it's actually the like Europeans see Alphonso Davies coming from MLS, and they see Tyler Adams or Brian Reynolds and Miguel Almiron, and they're like, oh man, this league, we better watch it because this the next great player coming into this league. But there's this persistent bias among a certain subset of American soccer fans that thinks that MLS is not that good. And honestly, the easiest way to rile them up is to make a U.S. national team depth chart with an MLS-based player ahead of a European-based player. Like if I put Jackson Ewell in the starting lineup of a U.S. national team projected 11, people will lose their shit. People will just absolutely lose their like Chris Richards has been very, very good for Hoffenheim the past couple of games. Young center back, came from an MLS academy, went to Bayern Munich. Not good enough for Bayern Munich, but he's starting in the Bundesliga. He's a good player. He's bad in the air. He is bad in the air. You could push him around. And in CONCACAF, if you're not good in the air, you're going to lose. And if I point that out and I say, like, that's maybe why I would rather have Aaron Long start over Chris Richards in Costa Rica, again, that same subset of fans will just lose their shit. So, and sometimes I steer away from it, and sometimes I put those best 11s out there just to get that kind of engagement. So
I'm all for it. I think it's funny every time. But so this is going to be our last question before we wrap it up, Matt. But if you were in Don Garber's seat for a day and you got to make one big executive rule change to the MLS, what would it be? Would it be more DPs? Would it be, the 1990s style penalties coming back? Like what?
It would not be that.
What would it be?
It would not be that. That's a good one. I think that, and assuming that, I mean, you guys know Don Garber doesn't make the rules, right? He
Well,
works for
yes,
the
yeah,
board and the
yeah.
owners, yeah. Assuming you get a quorum, I think a fourth DP would be huge. Like a fourth true DP, like you could spend anything you want on them, and the salary hits the salary at X amount. If you get four guys like that in an MLS team, you're talking about teams that not only would start to bury Liga MX teams, but would be like a legitimate threat to pull one off in the Club World Cup. And I think that that is, I think we're heading in that direction. It seems with some of the new rules, but it's not going to be that hard and fast. But that would be the big one for me, for sure.
I can definitely understand that. I mean, any of the roster rules would or
There's a
salary
lot.
cap rules would be a good change, that's for sure. Well, Matt, you said you had about 20 minutes for us. We're about there, so just we want to say thank you for coming on to the show today. And I would say everyone go follow Matt on Twitter at MattDoyle76 and go to MLSsoccer.com and check out his series Armchair Analyst. But Matt, the floor is yours. If you want to end on anything, if you want to tell the people to go follow you, check anything out, the floor is yours.
No, you guys did all the hard work. I appreciate it. It was good to meet you both, and we'll do it again. Take care,
All
boys.
right.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks
you,
for coming
Matt.
on. Take care.